readers! Today, Snowball and I are going to be discussing Me Before You, the original book written by jojomoyes and the 2016 movie based on the book. Now, the purpose of this video is to rate how good of a job the filmmakers did adapting the book to the movie. That way, if you are a fan of the book, you'll be able to decide whether you want to watch the movie or not. To that end, I am going to be discussing some spoilers in the book because I'm assuming if you're watching this video that you are already familiar with the book. So this is a little bit new for me, but I'm going to be doing a rating system today that will be based on ferrets. One ferret being the worst, meaning that the filmmakers probably only read the back flap of the book, to 4 ferrets, which means they actually read the book cover to cover and understood it. In case you don't know me or my furry friends, my name is Chris. I do 1-minute book reviews, book box unboxing videos, and all sorts of bookish stuff. So let's jump in and start talking about the movie, and I'm going to start with world building, or the setting of Me Before You. Now, in the book, the story is set in a small town in the English countryside. This town is very quiet, doesn't have a lot going on, other than I think it mentions that they do get a lot of tourists in the summer for their castle, the maze, and some of that type of stuff. So overall, in the book, I think Moyes does a really great job of setting up this kind of, sleepy, quiet little country town. Because of her writing, like when I read it, I can almost picture this small town, cobblestone streets, bike rides through the woods, that sort of thing. So that's like the image that I had in my head of where this book is supposed to take place. Now, in the movie, we really don't get to see that much of the town other than right in the beginning when we have Lou working in the coffee shop and when she walks home from there after she's been fired. I guess because we don't really get to see a lot of the town, it just kind of came across in the movie as standard town. So it was just an average town with nothing special about it in the movie. What I did think was special, though, is the castle. So, again, even though we don't get to see that much of it from the exterior or even interior, I still thought that the castle that they picked for the trainer's house was absolutely beautiful. And I think it really did help set up the fact that the trainer family and Will have a lot of money. Like, they're loaded. So I found it really interesting when Lou first walks into the annex, because that was something that I had not pictured in my head. What I pictured in my head for Will's annex was something very modern and very white, very minimalist, kind of like that first scene that we get of Will when he's still with his girlfriend, when he's in his apartment there. That's more of how I pictured the annex looking like. So even though the annex does still feel modern, it kind of feels like it's part log cabin, part industrial complex. So I still liked the aesthetic and I still liked the design of it, but it was a little bit of a shock to the system to see something that was not what I had pictured in my mind. And then finally, real quick, I do want to speak about the Clark family house. Again, other than a few scenes in Lou's room, we don't really get to see that much of the Clark house. And to me, excuse me for a second, someone's making a little bit of noise over here. Snowball, do you want to come say hi or do you want to play while I'm doing this video? Okay, here, take your strawberry. Take your strawberry and go. The story of my life. Anyway, where was I? So the Clark house. Okay. To me, I feel like the Clark house in the book is almost its own character. Like, the Clark house in the book really helps illustrate the fact that Lou's family does not have a lot of money. They're very working class, borderline poor. There aren't enough rooms to go around. Lou wants the bigger room that her sister has. There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of tension in the house. And so suffice to say, there's just a lot in the book that goes on at the house that we don't really get in the movie. And sure, you could argue that a lot of that side stuff may not be important to the overall, romance of the story, but I would argue that those scenes provide a lot of nuance and context, especially to Lou's character. So I feel like that was a little bit of a missed opportunity. So speaking of characters, let's move on to talk about some of the characters, starting with our main character, Louisa Clark, or Lou. As I just mentioned when speaking about the Clark house, I feel that the character of Lou in the movie is missing a lot of nuance. Her character in the movie seems very surface level. Like, if someone was watching the movie and had never read the book, all they would see is a silly young girl who wears brightly colored clothes and is not that smart. That's kind of how she comes across. Now, yes, there were times in the book that I got frustrated with Lou for not being aware or intelligent of a lot of things, especially as it relates to Will and his disabilities. But in the movie, she just comes off as way, way dumber. Like, way dumber, at least in my opinion. So there's also a lot of talk in the movie about Lou not reaching her potential. Will says it, her family says it, your potential, you have so much potential, etc., etc. But they never really take the time to explain why Lou has not reached her potential and what that really means. So Lou in the book had this traumatic experience in her past, and that is what kept her from reaching her potential. But guess what? That is not in the movie. So, yep, no traumatic backstory, no exploration about the anxiety that she feels planning all these things for Will, for planning all those events. Nothing about the complicated relationship she has with her sister, and by extension her family. Nothing about how stressful it was hiding Will's secret from her family and from her boyfriend. There's just a lot of nuance there that is definitely not in the movie. And I will just mention Patrick very quickly here because he's really not in the movie a lot. He's a very minor character. He's in 3 scenes, I think. Lou never moves in with him, again, because there's never an issue with Lou at her house and there not being enough room for everyone to be there. So there's not enough time to set up the fact that Lou has this big secret that she's been carrying around that she's never told anyone about. And she doesn't share it with the man that she's been with for 6 years. Patrick only has a few scenes. He comes off as kind of dumb as well, and then they break up, and that's it. So very much has there's no major impact of him in the movie. So that's pretty much it, which is a shame. So let's move on to Will. Oh, Will. First of all, it's impossible to make Sam Claflin, not look hot. So even though, they gave him a beard and the shaggy hair and all that stuff, he's still hot. Now, as far as his personality goes, I do think that the filmmakers did a better job portraying Will's personality. So especially, his sarcasm, his anger, and all those things that kind of make him keep people at arm's length, I think they did a good job of that. But again, I don't think that they went far enough into what Will was actually feeling. There's only one brief scene in the movie where Lou notices the scars that Will has on his arms, but it's never really talked about. It's never mentioned again. So unless you're really paying attention, someone may not even really think about or realize what that actually means. So, like I said, it's never brought up again. And there's really only one scene in the movie where Will gets sick and has to go to the hospital. So it's not like in the book where there's a number of incidents, of varying severity. There's all these different incidents that go on that really help shape how horrible, for lack of a better word, Will's life actually is. Now, when I was doing research for the book and movie, I did see on the internet that there was some backlash when the movie came out about the way that it portrayed Will. And basically, they were taking it that because Will was a paraplegic, he did not have any value. His life didn't have any value, and therefore he had to kill himself. Now, honestly, I could understand someone watching the movie and feeling that way because, like I said, I don't think they go far enough in the movie into his thoughts and his feelings and the deep, complex issues there that would make someone make the decisions that he does. You know, his life is very complicated, it's very complex, it's very nuanced, and honestly, you know, I don't think that anyone could have really pulled off that sort of deep, meaningful issue in the span of a 2-hour movie. I mean, maybe if that's all you focused on, but yeah, I think that would have been difficult to do. The other message of the movie is supposed to be about how Will and Louisa changed each other's lives. Other than the money thing, it's hard to see how Will actually changed Lou's life at all, at least in the movie, because again, it was never established how traumatic Lou's life had been and how small her life had become. There was none of that. She just comes off, like I said, as silly girl. So those are the two main characters. Now I'm going to switch over and talk about Will's family briefly, the Trainer family. In the book, Mr. and Mrs. Trainer almost act like complete strangers. You rarely see them in the same room together, and even when they are, they barely speak to each other. In the movie, however, they seem like a normal married couple. So there's no affair, there's no secretly running around, and while Mrs. Trainer still comes off as a bit, severe, she's not nearly as, cold and emotionless, seemingly emotionless as she is in the book. Now, again, I can see how someone would think or say that Mr. Trainer's affair doesn't really have any effect on the romance between Will and Lou, but there is that important scene in the book when Will is getting sick and Lou can't get a hold of anyone and she doesn't know what to do, and Mr. Trainer, who should have been there to help, is not because he's off with his other woman. So yeah, that is a miss thing. And then Mrs. Trainer, again, we don't get to know her as well as we do in the book. She has her own chapter in the book early on that is really important to the development of her character. Without that perspective, I think it would be hard for someone to understand how a parent could possibly help their own child and their life, just like Lou's mother couldn't understand it at the end. But I think if you're reading the book, you kind of do understand it. But again, like I said, nuance is important. It's very important to this story, and it's missing from the movie. And then I do have to mention the Clark family really quick. Again, we don't spend a lot of time with them in the movie, so we don't get to know them that well. We're told that they're poor, but as I've already explained, we don't really see that. And as a visual medium, the whole thing with movies is supposed to be show, not tell, and they didn't really do that. And the one thing that really annoyed me with the Clark family is Lou's sister, Trina. Honestly, one of my favorite relationships in the book was actually Lou's relationship with Trina, with her sister. Sibling relationships are complicated. Siblings fight, they get angry at each other, they get jealous, etc., etc. And then at the end of the day, they're still there for each other. So their relationship in the movie was boiled down to a couple of scenes of them chatting happily together. That was pretty much it. So that was a big disappointment for me. There's a few other characters in the book that I haven't mentioned. Nathan, he's there. But they're all pretty minor, don't have a lot of screen time, and they didn't really make a big impression, so I'm going to move on and talk about the plot. In general, the plot of the movie is the same as it is in the book. Everything that happens in the movie is what happens in the book, but not everything that's in the book is what happens in the movie. So, in other words, there was a lot of plot that was cut out. Snowball is very upset by this. Like I've already mentioned, we have Lou's backstory cut out, her traumatic past. Her relationship with her sister is mostly cut out. Her moving in with Patrick was cut out, and then into Will's house, that was cut out. And then we have scenes like the big wedding scene, right? That's a really big scene in the book. It's a big scene in the movie. Now, in the book, when Will and Lou go to this wedding, they get drunk, they spend the night at the hotel, and then the next morning, Will ends up getting really, really sick because Lou did not change his catheter when she was with him overnight. Now, in the movie, this scene technically does happen. It does. But the next morning, Will basically gets like a slap on the wrist from Nathan, like, oh, you shouldn't have done that, or you shouldn't have let her do that. And that's it. And then they move on. So there's no like real serious consequences or repercussions to those set of actions. So again, it's one of those things that like, it's really important to understand the nuances of Will's life and what it actually means to be him in order to understand why he is suffering. And then we have the big trip. So again, in the book, Lou spends so much time, all this time planning this trip of a lifetime, right? All this time, all this energy, and then Will get sick and they have to cancel it. And then she plans like a little simple beach trip. Now, in the movie, that was not there. It was always just the simple beach trip to begin with. There was no big life-changing, chance of a lifetime trip with all this crazy stuff. So again, we're missing the time and the nuance that Lou spent and what she goes through planning this big trip. The anxiety that she felt planning this trip, hiding it from all the people in her life, the time she spent online talking to groups of disabled people trying to understand Will's perspective and what they could do together, the pressure from Mrs. Trainer about how important this trip was, all that stuff is cut out. So when Will and Lou go on their trip, it's not as big of a deal as it is in the book. And then when they have their big fight on the beach and she cries and she runs off, like there's no F you, Will Trainer. Now sure, okay, it's a PG-13 movie, so maybe they didn't want to curse, but I think that's a really powerful moment for Lou that was diminished in the movie. And she just kind of comes off as like a boohoo, sad, whiny girl, which I think is a disservice to her character. So my overall feelings about the movie is basically that it diminished this complex and nuanced love story into much more of a fantasy romance story. And to be fair, I do believe that that is one of the reasons why people love this book, this story so much, is because it is kind of a fantasy romance. At the end of the day, though, I do believe that there are a lot of serious and heavy themes in this book that were lost in the movie, such as giving someone the grace to put themselves first and not knowing how important it is to have the power to make your own choices until that's taken away from you. So in conclusion, I am giving Me Before You 3 out of 4 possible ferrets. I believe the filmmakers skimmed through this book, like didn't actually read it word for word, but probably skimmed through it because they got, a lot of the stuff in there, but I think they failed to really understand the big themes and the points that the story was trying to make. So if you are a casual fan of Me Before You, you will probably enjoy the movie because, all the main things are there. But if you are someone that, really loves this book on a deep level and the way that it explores complex issues and relationships, you'll probably find the movie lacking. You might even be upset about it, honestly. So that's my evaluation of Me Before You, the book versus the movie. If you like this video at all, please give it a thumbs up so I know how to do more, and I would really appreciate any feedback that you wish to share about this type of video. Is there anything that you'd like to see me include next time? Anything I should leave out? Anything at all? Leave it in the comments section down below and let me know. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel. I do new videos every Sunday, Wednesday, and sometimes on Fridays. All right, everyone. Happy reading.